I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
The 1960 election was dominated by mounting Cold War tensions between the Soviet Union and the United States. Fearing an arms gap, both countries invested heavily in science and technology. In 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik, the first man-made satellite to orbit the Earth. When an American U-2 photo reconnaissance spy plane was shot down over Soviet territory and its pilot captured in 1960, tensions skyrocketed and resulted in the cancellation of President Eisenhower's planned trip to Moscow and the collapse of the Paris summit meeting with Soviet Premier Khrushchev.
The story of Cuba and Fidel Castro.
American fears of communist subversion grew even more as the Soviet Union economically and militarily aided the revolutionary regime of Fidel Castro in Cuba. According to studies at the time, over half the American people thought war with the Soviet Union was inevitable.
Born in the First World War in a gentle suburb of Boston, schooled at New England's finest halls, he had as a Harvard junior visited England and watched, with his father the ambassador, the decay of English power as Munich approached. Then tasted war himself in the far Pacific. Peace had brought him back to Boston politics, to the United States Senate in '52. Peace had graced him with a new bride, led him to an examination of history and heroes in a prize-winning book. Spectacular re-election to the Senate urged him on to the presidency. Now, home again, after 2 years' pursuit of ultimate power, he must wait the judgment of his fellow countrymen. From Whittier schools to Duke University, then off to war in the Pacific.
Like Kennedy, Nixon left the U.S. Navy after World War II to become a congressional representative. During his time in the House of Representatives, Nixon was an active member of the House Un-American Activities Committee, investigating high-level communists in the U.S. government. A renowned red hunter, he was instrumental in the 1950 perjury conviction of Alger Hiss, a high-ranking State Department employee believed to be a Soviet spy. After working on committees for foreign aid, Nixon established himself as an internationalist. And when Nixon was elected as vice president to Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1952, he traveled extensively as chief political spokesman. Nixon enjoyed a warm public reception from his kitchen debates with Premier Khrushchev. When accused of running a slush fund, Nixon responded in a nationally televised speech known as the Checkers speech.
One other thing I probably should tell you, because if I don't, they'll probably be saying this about me too. We did get something, a gift, after the election. A man down in Texas heard Pat on the radio mention the fact that our two youngsters would like to have a dog. And believe it or not, the day before we left on this campaign trip, we got a message from the Union Station in Baltimore saying they had a package for us. We went down to get it. You know what it was? It was a little Cocker Spaniel dog in a crate that he'd sent all the way from Texas. Black and white, spotted. And our little girl, Tricia, the 6-year-old, named it Checkers.
A brilliant political maneuver, the speech salvaged Nixon's career, and as time would show, he who could conquer the airways could conquer public opinion.
We're going to keep it.
If you're still watching television on a small screen set, you're missing a lot. Here, for example, is a close-up on a 10-inch set. See how much smaller it is than my head? Now I'd like to show you the same close-up on a 21-inch set. There. Just look at the difference. She's as big as I am now.
The televisions first appeared in the mid-40s. Only with the flourishing consumerism following World War II did the American public buy televisions in droves. With more spending money and time for leisure, America found a new pastime. Television became a bond for suburban baby boom families. While in 1950, only 11% of American homes had television, by 1960, the number had jumped to 88%. Television promoted capitalism through advertising and united the country with patriotic broadcasts.
Fine. Yes, I'd love to. Thanks, Jean. I'll be there. 2:00. Goodbye. You know, 3 weeks ago, I couldn't have accepted that invitation. Like so many people these days, we live in the suburbs, and Dave needs the car every day for business. When he was gone, I was practically a prisoner in my own home. I couldn't get out to see my friends, couldn't take part in PTA activities. I couldn't even shop when I wanted to. I had to wait till Thursday night after Dave brought the car home. But that's all changed now. 3 weeks ago, we bought another Ford, the new, low-priced, custom-line Victoria. Isn't it stunning? Dave has it all to himself, and I now have the ranch wagon all to myself. It's a whole new way of life. Now I'm free to go anywhere, do anything, see anybody anytime I want to. It's only good common sense. Why be stuck with one expensive car when you can enjoy all the fun and freedom of 2 fine Fords?
Today, more and more families are finding out how easy it is to become 2 Ford families. You can choose from 20 different models, colors galore, and each available with Thunderbird power, with styling inspired by the famous Ford Thunderbird, and each with the extra protection of Ford's Lifeguard design. See your Ford dealers soon.
And fight till he wins. Kennedy can. Who can do the job he begins? Kennedy can.
Kennedy identified himself with the Democratic Party of Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman, promising a new surge of legislative innovation in the 1960s and promoting liberal reforms. Hoping to mimic elements of the Roosevelt coalition of the 1930s, Kennedy stressed urban minorities, ethnic voting blocs, and organized labor. Emphasizing his new frontier, JFK wanted to develop new technologies and make advancements in space exploration. He also wanted to confront poverty, war, and ignorance in order to provide for a brighter future. Kennedy hoped to convert the conservative Catholics who had deserted the Democrats for Eisenhower in 1952 and 1956. Kennedy also aspired to hold his own in the pre-civil rights movement's Solid South. After choosing Texas Senator Lyndon Johnson as his running mate, Kennedy promised to get the nation moving again and declared that the United States would resist communism around the world.
Jack Kennedy can.